The Feeling of Power by Isaac Asimov. J. Schumann was used to dealing with the men in authority on long embattled Earth. He was only a civilian, but he originated programming patterns that resulted in self-directing war computers of the highest sort. Generals consequently listened to him, heads of congressional committees too. There was one of each in the special lounge of New Pentagon. General Wider was space-burned, and had half a small mouth puckered into a cipher. He smoked Nebian tobacco with the air of one whose patriotism was so notorious he could be allowed such liberties. Schumann, tall, distinguished, and programmer first class, faced them fearlessly.
This, gentleman, is Myron Obb.
Congressman Brandt peered down at the little man.
Ah, that would be the one with the unusual gift you discovered quite by accident.
He inspected the little man with the egg-balled head with amiable curiosity. The little man in return twisted the fingers of his hands anxiously. He had never been near such great men before. He was only an aging low-grade technician who had long ago failed all tests designed to smoke out the gifted ones among mankind, and had settled into the rut of unskilled labor. There was just this hobby of his that the great programmer had found out about and was now making such a frightening fuss over. General Wider was not impressed.
I find this atmosphere of mystery childish.
You won't in a moment. This is not something we can leak to the first comer. Obb?
There was something imperative about his manner of biting off that one-syllable name, but then he was a great programmer speaking to a mere technician.
Obb, how much is 9 times 7?
Obb hesitated for a moment. His pale eyes glimmered with a feeble anxiety.
63.
Congressman Brandt lifted his eyebrows.
Is that right?
Check it for yourself, Congressman.
The congressman took out his pocket computer, nudged the milled edges twice, looked at its face as it lay there in the palm of his hand, and put it back.
Is this the gift you brought us here to demonstrate? An illusionist?
More than that, sir. Obb has memorized a few operations, and with them he computes on paper.
A paper computer?
No, sir. Not a paper computer. Simply a piece of paper. General, would you be so kind as to suggest a number?
17.
And you, Congressman?
23.
Good. Obb, multiply those numbers, and please show the gentleman your manner of doing it.
Yes, programmer.
He fished a small pad out of one shirt pocket and an artist's hairline stylus out of the other. His forehead corrugated as he made painstaking marks on the paper.
Let's see that. Well, it looks like the figure 17.
So it does, but I suppose anyone can copy figures off a computer. I think I could even make a passable 17 myself, even without practice.
If you will let Obb continue, gentlemen.
The answer is 391. By Godfrey, so it is. How'd he guess?
No guess, Congressman. He computed that result and did it on this sheet of paper.
Humbug. A computer is one thing, marks on a paper are another.
Explain, Obb.
Yes, programmer. Well, gentlemen, I write down 17, and just underneath it I write down 23. Next, I say to myself, 7 times 3. Now, Obb, the problem is 17 times 23. Yes, I know, but I start by saying 7 times 3 because that's the way it works. Now, 7 times 3 is 21. And, how do you know that? I just remember it. It's always 21 on the computer. I've checked it any number of times. That doesn't mean it always will be, though, does it? Maybe. I'm not a mathematician, but I always get the right answers, you see. Well, anyway, go on. 7 times 3 is 21, so I write down 21. Then 1 times 3 is 3, so I write down 3 under the 2 of 21. Why under the 2? Because, well, it's difficult to explain.
If you will accept his work for the moment, We can leave the details for the mathematicians.
3 plus 2 makes 5, you see? So 21 becomes a 51. Now, you let that go for a while and start fresh. You multiply 7 and 2, that's 14. And 1 and 2, that's 2. Put them down like this, and it adds up to 34. Now, if you put the 34 under the 51 this way and add them, you get 391. And that's the answer.
I don't believe it. He goes through this rigmarole and makes up numbers and multiplies them and adds them this way and that, but I don't believe it. It's too complicated to be anything but hornswoggling.
Oh, no, sir. It only seems complicated because you're not used to it. Actually, the rules are quite simple and will work for any numbers.
Any numbers, eh? Come then.
The general took out his own computer, a severely styled GI model, and struck it at random.
Okay, make a 5738 on the paper. That's 5,738.
Yes, sir.
Now, 7,239.
Yes, sir.
And now, multiply those two.
It will take some time.
Take the time.
Go ahead, Ob.
Ob set to work, bending low. He took another sheet of paper, and another. The general took out his watch finally and stared at it.
Are you through with your magic-making, technician?
I'm almost done, sir. Here it is, sir. 41,537,382.
General Wider smiled patronizingly. He pushed the multiplication contact on his computer and then stared at the result.
Holy smokes, he's right.
The president of the Terrestrial Federation had grown haggard in office, and in private he allowed a look of settled melancholy to appear on his sensitive features. The Danubian War, after its early start of vast movement and great popularity, had trickled down into a sordid matter of maneuver and counter-maneuver, with discontent rising steadily on Earth. Possibly it was rising on Deneb, too. And now Congressman Brandt, head of the important Committee on Military Appropriations, was cheerfully and smoothly spending his half-hour appointment spouting nonsense.
Computing without a computer is a contradiction in terms.
Mr. President, computing is only a system for handling data. A machine might do it, or the human mind might. Let me give you an example. Using the new skills he had learned, Congressman Brandt worked out sums and products until the president, despite himself, grew interested.
Does this always work?
Every time, Mr. President. It is foolproof.
Is it hard to learn?
It took me a week to get the real hang of it. I think you would do better, Mr. President.
Well, it's an interesting parlor game, but what's the use of it?
What is the use of a newborn baby, Mr. President? At the moment, there is no use. But don't you see this points the way toward liberation from the machine? Consider, Mr. President, that the Danubian War is a war of a computer against computer. Their computers forge an impenetrable shield of counter-missiles against our missiles, and ours forge one against theirs. If we advance the efficiency of our computers, so do they theirs. For 5 years, a precarious and profitless balance has existed. Now we have in our hands a method for going beyond the computed, leapfrogging it, passing through it. We will combine the mechanics of computation with human thought. We will have the equivalent of intelligent computers, billions of them. I can't predict what the consequences will be in detail, but they will be incalculable. And if Deneb beats us to the punch, they may be unimaginably catastrophic.
What would you have me do?
You need to put the power of the administration behind the establishment of a secret project on human computation. Call it Project Number if you like. I can vouch for my committee, but I need the administration behind me.
But how far can human computation go?
Well,
There is no limit, according to programmer Schumann, who first introduced me to this discovery.
I've heard of Schumann, of course.
Yes, well, Dr. Schumann tells me that in theory there is nothing the computer can do that the human mind cannot do. The computer merely takes a finite amount of data and performs a finite amount of operations on them. The human mind can duplicate the process.
If Schumann says this, I am inclined to believe him in theory. But in practice, how can anyone know how a computer works?
Well, Mr. President, I asked the same question. It seems that at one time computers were designed directly by human beings. These were simple computers, of course, this being before the time of the rational use of computers to design more advanced computers had been established.
Yes, go on.
Technician Obb apparently had as his hobby the reconstruction of some of these ancient devices, and in doing so he studied the details of their workings and found he could imitate them. The multiplication I just performed for you is an imitation of the workings of a computer.
Amazing.
If I may make another point, Mr. President, the further we develop this thing, the more we can divert our federal effort from computer production and computer maintenance. As the human brain takes over, more of our energy can be directed into peacetime pursuits, and the impingement of war on the ordinary man will be less. This will be most advantageous for the party in power, of course.
Ah, I see your point. Well, sit down, Congressman, sit down. I want some time to think about this. But meanwhile, show me that multiplication trick again. Let's see if I can't catch the point of it.
Programmer Schumann did not try to hurry matters. Loser was conservative, very conservative, and liked to deal with computers as his father and grandfather had. Still, he controlled the West European Computer Combine, and if he could be persuaded to join Project Number in full enthusiasm, a great deal would be accomplished. But Loser was holding back.
I'm not sure I like the idea of relaxing our hold on computers. The human mind is a capricious thing. The computer will give the same answer to the same problem each time. What guarantee have we that the human mind will do the same thing?
The human mind, Computer Loser, only manipulates facts. It doesn't matter whether the human mind or a machine does it. They're just tools.
Yes, I've gone over your ingenious demonstration that the mind can duplicate the computer, but it seems to me a little in the air. I'll grant the theory, but what reason have we for thinking that theory can be converted to practice?
I think we have reason, sir. After all, computers have not always existed. The cavemen with their tree reams and stone axes and railroads had no computers.
And possibly they did not compute.
You know better than that. Even the building of a railroad or a ziggurat called for some computing, and that must have been without computers as we know them.
Do you suggest they computed in the fashion you demonstrate?
Probably not. After all, this method, we call it graphitics, by the way, from the old European word grapho, meaning to write, is developed from computers themselves, so it cannot have antedated them. Still, the cavemen must have had some method, eh?
Lost arts, if you're going to talk about lost arts.
No, I'm not a lost art enthusiast, though I don't say there may not have been some. After all, man was eating grain before hydroponics, and if the primitives ate grain, they must have grown it in soil. What else could they have done?
I don't know. But I'll believe in soil growing when I see someone grow grain in soil, and I'll believe in making fire by rubbing two pieces of flint together when I see that too.
Well, let's stick to graphitics. It's just part of the process of etherealization. Transportation, by means of bulky contrivances, is giving way to mass transference. Communications devices become less massive and more efficient constantly. For that matter, compare your pocket computer with the massive jobs of 1,000 years ago. Why not, then, the last step of doing away with computers altogether? Come, sir, Project number is a going concern. Progress is already headlong. But we want your help. If patriotism doesn't move you, consider the intellectual adventure involved.
What progress? What can you do beyond multiplication? Can you integrate a transcendental function?
In time, sir, in time. In the last month, I have learned to handle division. I can determine and correctly integral quotients and decimal quotients.
Decimal quotients? To how many places?
Any number.
Without a computer?
Set me a problem.
Divide 27 by 13 and take 6 places.
2.076923.
Well, now that's amazing. Multiplication didn't impress me too much because it involved integers after all, and I thought trick manipulation might do it, but decimals?
And that is not all. There is a new development that is so far top secret and which, strictly speaking, I ought not to mention. Still, we may have made a breakthrough on the square root front.
Square roots?
Well, it involves some tricky points, and we haven't licked the bugs yet, but Technician Ob, the man who invented the science that has amazing intuition in connection with it, maintains he has the problem almost solved. And he is only a technician. A man like yourself, a trained and talented mathematician, ought to have no difficulty.
Square roots.
Cube roots, too. Are you with us?
You can count me in.
General Wider stumped his way back and forth at the head of the room and addressed his listeners after the fashion of a savage teacher facing a group of recalcitrant students. It made no difference to the general that they were civilian scientists heading Project Number. The general was overall head, and he so considered himself every waking moment.
Now, square roots are fine. I can't do them myself, and I don't understand the methods, but they're fine. Still, the project will not be sidetracked into what some of you call fundamentals. You can play with graphitics any way you want after the war is over. But right now, we have very specific and very practical problems to solve.
In a far corner, Technician Ob listened with painful attention. He was no longer a technician, of course, having been relieved of his duties and assigned to the project with a fine-sounding title and good pay. But of course the social distinction remained, and the highly placed scientific leaders could never bring themselves to admit him to their ranks on a footing of equality. Nor, to do Ob justice, did he himself wish it. He was as uncomfortable with them as they with him.
Our goal is a simple one, gentlemen, the replacement of the computer. A ship that can navigate space without a computer on board can be constructed in 1/5 the time and at 1/10 the expense of a computer-laden ship. We could build fleets 5 times, 10 times as great as Deneb, if we could but eliminate the computer. And I see something even beyond this. It may be fantastic now, a mere dream, but in the future, I see the manned missile. At the present time, our chief bottleneck is the fact that missiles are limited in intelligence. The computer controlling them can only be so large, and for that reason, they can meet the changing nature of anti-missile defenses in an unsatisfactory way. Few missiles, if any, accomplish their goal, and missile warfare is coming to a dead end for the enemy, fortunately, as well as ourselves. On the other hand, a missile with a man or two within controlling flight by graphitics would be lighter, more mobile, more intelligent. It would give us a lead that might well mean the margin of victory. Besides which, gentlemen, the exigencies of war compel us to remember one thing. A man is much more dispensable than a computer. Manned missiles could be launched in numbers and under circumstances that no good general would care to undertake as far as computer-directed missiles are concerned.
He said much more, but Technician Ob did not wait. Technician Ob, in the privacy of his quarters, labored long over the note he was leaving behind. It read finally as follows.
When I began the study of what is now called graphitics, it was no more than a hobby. I saw no more in it than an interesting amusement, an exercise of the mind. When Project Number began, I thought that others were wiser than I, that graphitics might be put to practical use as a benefit to mankind, to aid in the production of perhaps really practical mass transference devices. But now I see it is to be used only for death and destruction. I cannot face the responsibility involved in having invented graphitics.
He then turned the focus of a protein depolarizer on himself and fell instantly and painlessly dead. They stood over the grave of the little technician while tribute was paid to the greatness of his discovery. Programmer Schumann bowed his head along with the rest of them, but remained unmoved. The technician had done his share and was no longer needed after all. He might have started graphitics, but now that it had started, it would carry on by itself, overwhelmingly, triumphantly, until manned missiles were possible with who knows what else.
9 times 7 is 63, and I don't need a computer to tell me so. The computer is in my own head.
Knowing this gave him a great deal of satisfaction, and it was amazing the feeling of power that gave him.